Naira's eyes snapped open, and the first thing she registered was the weight. A heavy, muscular arm draped across her waist, holding her against a hard chest that rose and fell with steady breaths. Her heart kicked into overdrive. The sheets beneath her were silk, expensive, nothing like the cheap cotton she owned. Sunlight poured through massive floor-to-ceiling windows, and when she dared to turn her head, she saw him. A man she didn't recognize, beautiful and terrifying, with intricate tattoos crawling up his bare arms and Korean script inked across his collarbone. His eyes were closed, dark lashes resting against sharp cheekbones, but even in sleep he looked dangerous. And she was wearing nothing but his shirt. Oh God. Oh God, what did I do? Before we dive into how Naira ended up in bed with one of the most dangerous men in the city and whether she'll escape with her heart intact, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. If you love stories about forbidden attraction, dangerous men who fall impossibly hard, and curvy black women who refuse to be conquered, this channel is your new obsession. Drop a comment telling me if you'd panic or stay if you woke up like this. Now let's see how Naira handles the most terrifying morning of her life. Naira tried to move slowly, carefully, praying she could slip out of bed without waking him. Her dress from last night, that tight black number she'd worn for her shift at the Ember Room, was draped over a chair across the massive bedroom. Her heels sat beneath it, perfectly placed like a museum display. The room itself was enormous, modern, screaming money in every corner. This wasn't just wealthy. This was powerful. She lifted his arm gently, her breath caught in her throat, and managed to slide toward the edge of the bed. Almost there. Almost free. You're awake. His voice froze her blood. Deep, controlled, with the faintest accent that made each word feel deliberate. Naira whipped her head around to find him watching her, dark eyes fully alert as if he'd been awake the entire time. Waiting. Who are you? The words came out sharper than she intended, fear making her defensive. She clutched the sheets to her chest even though his shirt covered her to mid-thigh. Where the hell am I? He sat up slowly, and the movement revealed more of his body. More tattoos, more scars, more evidence of a life she couldn't begin to comprehend. He reached for a glass of water on the nightstand, took a drink, utterly calm while she was spiraling into panic. You're safe, he said finally. That's all you need to know right now. Safe. Naira's laugh was bitter, high-pitched. I wake up in a strange bed, in a strange place, wearing clothes I don't remember putting on, next to a man I've never seen before, and you think telling me I'm safe is going to help. You were drunk last night. 3 men followed you out of the club when your shift ended. They had plans for you. He said it so matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. I intervened. The memory hit her in fragments. The end of her shift at the Ember Room. Walking toward the subway, exhausted, feet aching in her heels. Footsteps behind her, too close, too fast. Hands grabbing at her purse. A scream caught in her throat. Then nothing but darkness and the vague sensation of being lifted, of strong arms and a voice speaking in a language she didn't understand. She couldn't finish the question. The shame and fear mixing in her throat made it impossible. No. He said it simply, without offense or defensiveness. I don't touch women who can't consent. You slept in my bed. I slept in the chair. He gestured toward a leather armchair by the window, and for the first time, Naira noticed the blanket draped over it, the indentation in the cushion. You were safe. She studied his face, searching for the lie, for the trap, but his expression gave away nothing. He could have been carved from marble for all the emotion he showed. And yet there was something in his eyes when he looked at her. Something hungry and restrained all at once, like a predator who'd decided not to pounce. Yet, I need to leave. Naira swung her legs out of bed, her bare feet hitting cold hardwood. The shirt barely covered her, and she felt his gaze track every curve, every inch of brown skin revealed. She stood, determined to maintain whatever dignity she had left. Thank you for whatever you did, but I have to go. There's breakfast in the kitchen if you're hungry. And your phone is fully charged on the nightstand. The casual domesticity of it threw her. She grabbed her phone, checking frantically for messages, for missed calls. Her roommate had texted twice asking if she made it home. That was it. She'd only been gone one night, but it felt like she'd fallen into an alternate universe. The bathroom is through that door, he continued, standing now, and God, he was tall. Well over 6 feet, all lean muscle and dangerous grace. Take your time. I'll have my driver take you anywhere you want to go. Your driver. Naira grabbed her dress, her heels, backing toward the bathroom. Right. Because you're the kind of man who has drivers. Who are you? For the first time, something like amusement flickered across his face. Kael'vas. The name meant nothing to her then. It should have. Everyone in the city knew that name, or at least everyone who paid attention to the shadows. But Naira had spent her whole life trying to stay in the light, working honest jobs, keeping her head down. She didn't run in circles where names like Kael'vas mattered. Well, Kael'vas, she said, one hand on the bathroom door handle, I appreciate the rescue and the not assaulting me, but I don't need a savior. And I definitely don't need whatever this is. She started to close the door, but his voice stopped her. You don't belong in places like mine, Naira Cole. Her blood turned to ice. How do you know my name? Your ID was in your purse when I retrieved it from the men who tried to rob you. He took a step closer, and the room suddenly felt much smaller, the air thicker. But I would have found out anyway. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Because from the moment I saw you, I knew I'd need to know everything about you. He said it like a confession, like a threat, like a promise. Now go. Get dressed. Leave if that's what you want. It is what I want. Then go, Naira. He turned away, giving her privacy she hadn't asked for, presenting his back with its intricate tattoo work, dragons and flowers and Korean script winding across his shoulders. But we both know you'll see me again. Naira fled into the bathroom and locked the door with shaking hands. She leaned against the sink, staring at her reflection in the massive mirror. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a mess, and she looked exactly like what she was, a woman who'd spent the night in a stranger's bed, even if nothing had happened. She should feel relieved, grateful. Instead, she felt unsettled, like she'd just escaped something but left a piece of herself behind in the process. She showered quickly, using his expensive products, trying not to think about the intimacy of it. When she emerged 20 minutes later, dressed in last night's clothes, he was gone. A note sat on the kitchen counter next to a plate of food, eggs, toast, fruit arranged beautifully. Eat. The driver is waiting in the lobby. K. Naira didn't eat. She took the elevator down 60 floors, her mind racing the entire time. The driver was exactly where Kael said he'd be, an older Korean man who opened the door without a word and drove her home without question. As she climbed the stairs to her third-floor walk-up, Naira told herself that was it. A strange, frightening experience she'd survived. She'd never see Kael'vas again. She'd be more careful leaving work. She'd forget those dark eyes and tattooed arms and the way he looked at her like she was something precious and breakable and utterly fascinating. She was wrong about all of it. 4 days later, Naira was in the middle of her shift at the Ember Room, balancing a tray of overpriced cocktails and navigating the crush of Friday night bodies, when the entire atmosphere changed. It was subtle at first. Conversations dropping off. People turning to look toward the entrance. The security team straightening to attention. And then she saw him. Kael'vas walked into the Ember Room like he owned it. Maybe he did. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent, perfectly tailored to his frame. The tattoos on his neck were just barely visible above his crisp white collar. His hair was styled back from his face, and he moved through the crowd with the kind of confidence that made people instinctively step aside. He didn't look around. Didn't search. He walked directly to the VIP section, her section, and sat down in the best booth as if he'd had a standing reservation. Naira's hands started to shake. She delivered her current drinks on autopilot, mind spinning. This couldn't be a coincidence. The Ember Room was one of dozens of upscale clubs in the city. What were the odds he'd just happened to choose this one? 0. The odds were 0 because this wasn't chance. She approached his table with her professional smile plastered on, the one that said, I'm friendly, but don't touch. Welcome to the Ember Room. Can I get you something to drink? Whiskey. Neat. His eyes met hers, and there was that look again. Hungry. Patient. Like he had all the time in the world to wait for what he wanted. It's good to see you, Naira. This is harassment, she hissed, keeping her voice low so nearby tables wouldn't hear. This is a public establishment. I'm a paying customer. He leaned back against the leather booth, completely relaxed. Unless you're suggesting the club discriminates based on, what, ethnicity? Appearance? You know what I mean. I know you look beautiful when you're angry. He said it so calmly, like he was commenting on the weather. I'll take that whiskey whenever you're ready. Naira wanted to refuse. Wanted to call her manager, call security, have him thrown out. But something in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't a threat exactly. More like a certainty, as if he already knew how this would play out and was simply waiting for her to catch up. She brought him his whiskey. He thanked her, tipped her $100 on a $15 drink, and watched her work for the rest of the night. It became a pattern. Every shift, there he was. Same booth. Same whiskey. Same unsettling attention. He never got drunk no matter how many drinks he ordered. Never touched her or made inappropriate comments. Just watched with that dark, intense gaze that made her skin feel too tight, her body too warm. The other servers noticed. Started whispering. Why does the hot Asian guy only sit in Naira's section? Is he stalking her? Is she sleeping with him? The tips from his table were so large they started causing jealousy, and Naira felt like a bird in a gilded cage, performing for an audience of one. A week in, her coworker Shanice cornered her in the break room. Girl, who is that man? And why does he look at you like you're the only person in the room? I don't know, Naira lied. Some rich guy with too much time on his hands. Rich doesn't cover it. I asked Marcus at the door. That's Kale Voss. You know, Black Meridian? The syndicate that runs half the city. Shanice's eyes were wide. Naira, that man is dangerous. I know. Then why are you serving him like it's normal? Because what else am I supposed to do? Naira rubbed her temples. Refuse to serve a paying customer? Get myself fired. Be careful. Men like that don't obsess over girls like us for no reason. They want something. Shanice's words haunted Naira through the rest of her shift. What did Kale want? He'd said she didn't belong in places like his, but here he was, coming to her place, her territory. Watching. Waiting. It came to a head on the 10th night. Naira was near closing, the crowd thinning out, when she felt a hand close around her wrist. She turned to find a drunk patron, middle-aged and entitled, pulling her toward him with a grip that would leave bruises. Come on, sweetheart, just one dance, he slurred, his breath reeking of bourbon and entitlement. I've been tipping you all night. Least you can do is be friendly. Sir, please let go. Naira kept her voice professional even as panic rose in her throat. This happened sometimes in nightclub work. Usually, she could handle it, could smile and deflect and get security if needed. But his grip was tight, getting tighter, and his other hand was reaching for her waist. Don't be like that. You smile for everyone else. Let go. Naira tried to pull away, and that's when his hand grabbed her hip, fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. She was about to scream for security when suddenly the man's face went white. His hand released her wrist so fast she stumbled backward, and when she looked up, Kale was there. He hadn't rushed over. Hadn't made a scene. He was just there, standing behind the drunk man with one hand on the back of his neck. To anyone watching from a distance, it might have looked almost friendly, like he was just getting the guy's attention. But Naira saw the way the man's knees buckled slightly, saw the terror bleeding into his eyes, saw the exact moment he understood he'd made a terrible mistake. She said let go, Kale said quietly, his voice barely audible over the music, but somehow cutting through every other sound. So you let go. You apologize. And then you leave and never come back to this establishment. Do we understand each other? The man nodded frantically, words tumbling out. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean anything, I was just... Leave. The man practically ran for the exit, and the few people who'd noticed the confrontation quickly looked away, suddenly very interested in their drinks. Kale released him and turned to Naira, his expression shifting from cold fury to something softer, concerned. Are you hurt? I'm fine. Naira was shaking, adrenaline and anger, and something else coursing through her. I didn't need your help. I had it under control. Your wrist is already bruising. She looked down and saw he was right. Red marks were blooming where the drunk had grabbed her. I've dealt with worse. You shouldn't have to. Kale stepped closer, not touching but close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar and smoke, and something darker. No one touches what I'm watching. I'm not yours to watch. Not yet. The certainty in those two words made something hot and dangerous coil low in Naira's stomach. She should walk away. Should thank him and maintain her distance. Should remember that this man was dangerous, that he represented everything she'd spent her life trying to avoid. Instead, she stood there as he raised his hand, not touching her but close, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his palm near her cheek. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Everything." His eyes held hers, dark and infinite. "But I'll settle for you not being afraid of me." "I'm not afraid." "Liar." He lowered his hand. "Your heart is racing. I can see your pulse in your throat. You're terrified. Of you? Or of how much I don't want you to leave?" The admission hung between them, raw and true. Something flashed in Cale's eyes, triumph and hunger, and something almost like relief. He opened his mouth to respond, but Naira's manager appeared, breaking the moment. "Naira, is everything all right here?" "Everything's fine, Marcus. Just a misunderstanding with a customer." Marcus looked between them, clearly uncertain. "Mr. Voss, we appreciate your patronage, but if there's a problem..." "No problem," Cale said smoothly, his professional mask sliding back into place. "I was just ensuring Ms. Cole wasn't harassed. The other patron has left." "Right. Well, thank you." Marcus still looked uncomfortable. "Naira, why don't you take your break?" She nodded, grateful for the escape, and headed for the staff room. She didn't look back, but she felt Cale's eyes on her the entire way, heavy as a physical touch. When she emerged 15 minutes later, he was gone. But there was a note tucked under the edge of her station, written on expensive cardstock in elegant handwriting. "You're stronger than you know. But strength doesn't mean you have to face everything alone. K." Naira crumpled the note and threw it away. Then, when her shift ended, she dug it back out of the trash and tucked it into her purse. 3 days later, her manager called her into the office. "Naira, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to let you go." The words didn't compute at first. Naira stared at Marcus across his cluttered desk, sure she'd misheard. "What?" "Why?" "Management's decision." "I don't have details." "That's not an answer. I'm one of your best servers. My numbers are consistently high, I'm never late, I've never had a serious customer complaint." "I know." Marcus looked genuinely sorry. "But the decision came from above me." "Way above me. Here's 2 weeks severance." He slid an envelope across the desk. "I really am sorry, Naira. This isn't personal." But it was personal. Naira knew it in her bones even before she walked out of Marcus's office with her belongings in a cardboard box. She knew it when none of the other managers would meet her eyes. Knew it when security escorted her out like she'd stolen something instead of just existing. She stood on the street outside the Ember Room, everything she'd kept in her locker clutched in her arms, and felt her carefully constructed life crumble around her. And underneath the shock and fear and anger, one thought burned brighter than all the rest. Cale Voss did this. This is where everything changes, and you're not going to believe what Naira does next. If you're as obsessed with this story as I am, smash that like button and share this with someone who loves complicated, dangerous romance. Drop a comment, would you confront him or run? Your engagement fuels these stories. Now let's see what happens when Naira tracks down the man who destroyed her life. It took Naira 2 days to find his address. 2 days of swallowing her pride and asking careful questions to the right people, of learning that Cale Voss wasn't just rich and wasn't just dangerous. He was the acting leader of Black Meridian, one of the most powerful crime syndicates in the city. His father had built an empire on blood and fear, and Cale had inherited it all at 23 when the old man died. Now, at 29, he controlled territories, businesses, people's lives with nothing more than a word. And he'd focused all that power on destroying her livelihood. Naira showed up at the Apex, his building, at midnight on the 3rd day. The doorman took one look at her and reached for his phone, but before he could make a call, Cale's voice came through the intercom. "Send her up." Of course. He'd been expecting her. Probably had cameras, notifications, knew the moment she walked within a block of his building. The thought made her angrier. The elevator ride to the 60th floor felt both endless and too short. When the doors opened directly into his penthouse, he was waiting, leaning against the kitchen counter in dark jeans and a black t-shirt, looking far too casual for a man who'd just ruined someone's life. "You had me fired," Naira said without preamble, stepping into his space like she owned it. Fury made her brave, made her reckless. You ruined my life because what? I wouldn't fall at your feet? Because I didn't swoon when you showed up at my job every night like some kind of stalker. I removed you from a dangerous situation. His voice was calm, infuriating in its control. Those men who followed you that first night? They work for Iron Gate, a rival syndicate. They were watching you because of me, because they saw me protecting you and thought you were leverage. He straightened, taking a step toward her. As long as you worked there, you were a target. So you decided for me? You just took away my choice, my income, my life. Yes. The honesty of it stole her breath. No apology. No justification beyond the simple facts. Just yes, I did this to you, and I'd do it again. I hate you, Naira said, but the words came out weaker than she intended. I know. Kale walked past her to a side table and picked up a folder, held it out. There's a job offer inside. Personal assistant, chef, companion. The pay is 4 times what you made at the club. You'll live here in one of the guest rooms. You'll be safe. Safe? I'll be your prisoner. You'll be protected. There's a difference. Not to me there isn't. Naira refused to take the folder. I'd rather starve than be owned by you. Then starve. He set the folder back down, his expression unreadable. The offer stands regardless. When you change your mind, and you will, you know where to find me. I won't change my mind. We'll see. He moved toward the windows, dismissing her with the gesture. The elevator is behind you. Leave whenever you're ready. Naira wanted to scream. Wanted to throw something. Wanted to make him react, make him feel even a fraction of the chaos he'd created in her life. Instead, she turned on her heel and left, pride burning in her chest like a living thing. She lasted 11 days. 11 days of submitting job applications that went nowhere, of interviews that seemed promising until mysteriously, the position was filled. 11 days of watching her savings account drain dollar by dollar. 11 days of knowing exactly who was behind every closed door, every "will call you," every rejection. On the 12th day, Naira packed a suitcase with what little she owned, told her roommate she was staying with family, and showed up at the apex with the last shreds of her dignity clutched tight. Kale opened the door before she could knock. He looked unsurprised, like he'd known down to the hour when she'd break. Maybe he had. I'm here because I chose to be, Naira said, stepping past him into the penthouse. Not because you own me. Not because you control me. Because I need the money and you've made it impossible for me to get it anywhere else. But I'm choosing this, you understand? Me. My choice. I understand. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. Your room is down the hall. Second door on the left. There's a private bathroom. I've taken the liberty of stocking some basics, but make a list of anything else you need. How thoughtful. The prison comes pre-furnished. It's not a prison, Naira. Then what is it? He looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time since she'd met him, Kale Voss looked uncertain. I don't know yet. And just like that, Naira Cole moved in with the most dangerous man she'd ever met, and neither of them had any idea what they'd just started. The first week was strange, like living with a polite stranger who happened to be a crime lord. Kale was gone most of the time, disappearing into meetings and phone calls and business Naira didn't ask about. When he was home, he was quiet, controlled, moving through the penthouse like a ghost. But she felt him watching her. Always watching. Naira cooked because that was part of the job and because it gave her something to do with her hands. She cleaned even though he had people for that. She explored the massive penthouse, memorizing exits and windows and the layout like she might need to escape at any moment. She noticed things he probably didn't want her to see. The pill bottles in his bathroom, half hidden behind the mirror. Prescription labels for anxiety, for pain, for sleep. The nightmares that made him wake gasping at 3 in the morning, the sounds carrying through the walls. The way he never really slept, just closed his eyes for a few hours and called it rest. One night, unable to sleep herself, Naira found him in the kitchen at 2 a.m. He stood at the window, staring out at the city like he was looking for something he'd lost. As she watched, he took 3 pills dry, tilting his head back and swallowing them without water, his hand shaking slightly. Those will kill you eventually, she said from the doorway. He didn't turn around. Eventually. Is that what you want? I want to sleep without seeing their faces. Whose faces? Everyone I've killed. He said it so simply, so honestly, that for a moment Naira forgot to breathe. Everyone I've hurt. Every choice I've made that can't be unmade. They visit me every night. Naira should have backed away. Should have returned to her room and locked the door and reminded herself that this was a monster, a murderer, someone she should fear. Instead, she crossed the kitchen and took the pill bottle from his hand. He let her, offering no resistance. "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't bourbon or pills?" she asked. "I don't remember." "Sit down." To her surprise, he did, sinking onto one of the bar stools like his strings had been cut. Naira moved around the kitchen with purpose, pulling eggs from the fridge, bread from the counter. She cooked in silence while Kale watched, and something about the domesticity of it felt more intimate than anything they'd shared so far. She set a plate in front of him 15 minutes later. Scrambled eggs, toast, nothing fancy. "Eat." He picked up the fork slowly, like he'd forgotten how. Ate mechanically, without tasting, but he finished everything. When the plate was empty, he looked up at her with something raw in his eyes. "Why are you being kind to me?" he asked quietly. "Because you're human," Naira said simply. "And humans need to eat. Even the ones who've done terrible things. I don't deserve kindness. Let me decide what you deserve." Something shifted in that moment, a crack appearing in the wall between them. Kale looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, and what he found seemed to surprise him. "You're not afraid of me," he said. "I'm terrified of you. But I'm also not going to let you kill yourself with pills and guilt while I'm living under your roof." Naira crossed her arms. "So here's the deal. You eat real food at least once a day. You try to sleep. And in exchange, I'll stay and do whatever job you've invented for me. And if I don't, then I leave and you can go back to your pills and your nightmares and your slow suicide." For a moment, she thought he might refuse. Might tell her to leave right now. Instead, Kael'vas did something she'd never seen him do before. He smiled. Just a small quirk of his mouth, but it transformed his face, made him look younger, almost vulnerable. "Deal," he said. From that night on, things changed. Slowly, carefully, like ice melting at the edges. Kale started coming home for meals. Started talking to her, not just giving orders, but actual conversation. He told her about his childhood in Korea, about immigrating at 8 years old, about the violence and poverty that had shaped him. She told him about growing up in the South Side, about dreams she'd had before life got in the way. They didn't touch, didn't cross any lines. But the air between them grew thick with possibility, with a tension that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with want. 3 weeks into her stay, Naira woke to the sound of breaking glass. She ran into the living room without thinking, without grabbing her phone or calling for help, and found Kale standing in the center of the room, surrounded by destruction. His phone lay crushed on the floor. Papers were scattered everywhere. A lamp was overturned. And Kale stood in the middle of it all, chest heaving, his face a mask of cold fury that made her blood run cold. "What happened?" she asked carefully, staying near the doorway. "Someone leaked information about a shipment. 3 of my men are dead. The cargo's gone. Millions in losses." His voice was flat, emotionless, which somehow made it worse. "It was my brother. Riven did this? He's been making moves against me for months. Building alliances with Iron Gate, my biggest rival. And now he's given them everything they need to destroy me." Kale's hands clenched into fists. "My own brother wants me dead." Naira watched him spiral, watched the careful control he always maintained start to crack at the edges. Without thinking, she crossed the room, glass crunching under her bare feet, and took his hand. He flinched at the contact like it burned, but didn't pull away. "You don't know who I am without violence," he said quietly, his eyes finally meeting hers. "I was 8 when my father put a gun in my hand. 13 when I made my first kill. This is all I know. Blood and power and brutality. I don't know how to be anything else." "That's not true, isn't it?" He did pull away then, started pacing like a caged animal. "Look at what I've done to you. Arranged to have you fired. Manipulated every part of your life. Trapped you here because I couldn't stand the thought of you being anywhere I couldn't see you, couldn't protect you. I'm obsessed with you, Naira. Dangerously obsessed. And you should run from me before I destroy you too." "You're a man," Naira said firmly, and the conviction in her voice made him stop pacing. A damaged, complicated, infuriating man who's done terrible things. But you're still a man, Kale. Not a monster. A man. He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language, like the concept of his own humanity was something he'd forgotten long ago. You don't understand what you're saying. I understand perfectly. You think you're beyond redemption, beyond saving. But I've watched you for 3 weeks. I've seen you try to sleep, try to eat, try to be something other than what your father made you. That's not a monster. That's a man fighting to be better. I'll destroy you, he whispered. Eventually, being near me will destroy you. Maybe. Naira closed the distance between them again, stood close enough to feel the heat radiating off his body. But you don't get to decide that for me. Only I get to decide what I can handle. Kale's hand came up slowly, giving her time to move away, to reject the touch. When she didn't, his fingers traced the line of her jaw with devastating gentleness, like she was made of glass, and he was afraid of breaking her. I'm going to fall in love with you, he said, and it sounded like a confession and a threat and a promise all at once. If I haven't already. This is your life, she said, and her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. This is what loving you means. Running. Hiding. Watching people die. Kale stopped mid-conversation, his eyes snapping to hers. He said something sharp in Korean and ended the call. Yes, this is my life. Violence and death and constant vigilance. If you stay with me, this is what you're choosing. He stepped over a body without looking down, coming to stand in front of her. So choose, Naira. Right now. Stay or go. But choose knowing exactly what you're signing up for. She looked at him, this man who'd turned her world upside down. This man who killed without hesitation, but held her like she was precious. This man who was broken and dangerous and somehow, impossibly, hers. Okay, she said. His eyes widened slightly, the only sign of surprise he ever showed. Okay, I see you, kill boss. All of you. The violence and the nightmares and the blood. The way you kill without blinking but make sure I eat breakfast. The monster and the man. She stepped closer, glass crunching under her feet. And I'm not running. So where are we going? Something like wonder crossed his face, there and gone so fast she almost missed it. He pulled her against him, kissed her forehead once, hard. Somewhere they'll never find us. They made it to the underground garage in under 3 minutes, Naira carrying a hastily packed bag, Kale on his phone coordinating movements she didn't understand. His car was waiting, a sleek black thing that probably cost more than her childhood home. He held the door for her, always the gentleman, even covered in blood, and they were pulling out when the second wave hit. Headlights flooded the garage. An engine roared to life. Kale cursed in Korean and jerked the wheel, but there were too many of them. Gunfire erupted, bullets pinging off the concrete pillars around them. He returned fire through his window, one-handed, while steering with the other. Naira saw him take a hit. Saw him grunt as the bullet grazed his shoulder, blood blooming through his shirt. And something primal and furious took over. She didn't think. Didn't plan. She just grabbed a piece of metal debris from the ground as they passed, threw open her door, and swung it at the nearest attacker with all her strength. The man went down hard, and she kept swinging, kept fighting, adrenaline turning her vision red. Kale appeared beside her, bleeding but alive, shock written across his face. What are you doing? What does it look like? She swung again, connected with another attacker's knee. I'm choosing, Kale. I'm choosing you. Now get us out of here. He grabbed her hand and they ran for the car, bullets whining past them. They dove inside and he drove like hell itself was chasing them, weaving through traffic, running red lights, breaking every law that existed until the city blurred around them. They ended up at a safe house Naira didn't know existed, tucked in the industrial district where questions weren't asked. Kale killed the engine and just sat there for a moment, breathing hard, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. You could have died, he said finally, his voice rough. You should have stayed in the car. You should have. So could you. So should you. Naira turned to face him, her own hands shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. We're in this together now, remember? Or was that just talk? He grabbed her face with both hands, his palms warm and slightly sticky with blood, his grip almost painful. Don't ever do that again. Don't ever put yourself in danger for me. I'm not worth it. Let me decide what you're worth. And then he was kissing her. Desperate and furious and full of 3 weeks of tension and tonight's terror. His hands tangled in her hair, pulled her closer, and Naira kissed him back like she'd been drowning and he was air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead against hers. I can't protect you if you won't protect yourself, he whispered. Then stop trying to protect me and start trusting me to stand beside you. He pulled back enough to look at her, really look at her, and what he found in her face seemed to shake something loose inside him. You're terrifying. Good. Naira touched his wounded shoulder gently, and he flinched. Now let me clean this before you bleed all over your expensive car. They stumbled into the safe house, and Naira played nurse with supplies from a first aid kit that was far too well stocked for comfort. Kale sat still while she cleaned and bandaged his shoulder, his eyes never leaving her face. Why? He asked quietly. Why didn't you run when you had the chance? Because running would have been easier. And I'm tired of easy. She tied off the bandage, her fingers lingering on his skin. I spent my whole life playing it safe, staying in my lane, never taking risks. And where did it get me? Serving drinks to drunk men who grabbed me. Living paycheck to paycheck. Alone. You're not alone anymore. No, I'm not. She met his eyes. For better or worse, I'm yours. And you're mine. So stop trying to push me away and let me in. Kale studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. And over the next 3 days, trapped in the safe house while he orchestrated his counterattack, he did exactly that. He told her about his father's brutality, about learning to kill before he learned to read. About his mother who died when he was 5, leaving him alone with a monster. About Riven, who'd always been the favorite until their father decided Kale was more useful. About the pills he'd started taking at 16 when the nightmares became unbearable. About the addiction he couldn't quite break. Naira listened to all of it, holding him when he shook, staying silent when words would have been intrusive. And slowly, painfully, Kale Voss began to trust her with the parts of himself he'd never shown anyone. On the 3rd night, as they lay in the single bed together, not touching but close, always close, he spoke into the darkness. I've never let anyone see me like this. Weak. Vulnerable. Afraid. You're not weak. You're human. In my world, those are the same thing. Then maybe your world is wrong. Naira turned to face him, could just make out his profile in the dim light from the window. You've built your whole life around being untouchable, unreachable. But everyone needs someone, Kale. Even you. I need you. He said it simply, like it was fact. I've needed you from the moment I saw you. And that terrifies me more than any bullet, any rival, any threat. Because needing someone means they can destroy you. Then I guess we're even. Because you could destroy me too. She reached out, found his hand in the darkness. But we're not going to. We're going to choose each other, every day, and figure this out together. His fingers laced through hers, and they fell asleep like that, hands joined, 2 broken people finding something whole in the wreckage. On the 4th day, Kale received confirmation. Riven was dead, killed in a shootout with police after they raided one of his safe houses. Iron Gate's leadership was in federal custody. The war was over. Kale stood at the window of the safe house, staring out at the gray morning, and said nothing. Naira waited, letting him process, knowing he needed time. He was my brother, Kale said finally. My blood. And I'm relieved he's dead. What does that make me? Human. Complicated. Someone who's been hurt and hurt others in return. She came to stand beside him. You don't have to feel guilty for surviving, Kale. Don't I? He turned to her, and his eyes were red-rimmed. He died hating me. They all die hating me eventually. I don't hate you. Not yet. But you will. When you see what I really am, when the newness wears off and you're left with just the monster. Stop. Naira grabbed his face, forced him to look at her. I've seen the monster, Kale. I watched you kill 6 men without blinking. I watched you orchestrate the destruction of your enemies. I've seen all of it, and I'm still here. So stop waiting for me to leave and accept that maybe, just maybe, I love the man underneath all that darkness. He went very still. What did you say? You heard me. Her heart was pounding, but she didn't look away. I love you. Obsessively. Stupidly. In ways that probably aren't healthy. But I love you. You shouldn't. But his hands came up to cover hers, holding them against his face. You deserve better than me. Let me decide what I deserve. She smiled, even though her eyes were stinging. Now say it back, you emotionally constipated crime lord. A laugh punched out of him, broken and beautiful. I love you. God help us both, I love you more than anything. He pulled her against him, buried his face in her hair. You're going to be the death of me, Naira Cole. Probably. But what a way to go. We're in the final stretch now, and this is where everything comes together. If you've made it this far, if Naira and Kale's story has grabbed you by the heart and refused to let go, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop a comment telling me what you felt during this story. Did you cry? Did you hold your breath? Did you fall in love with them too? Your engagement means everything, and it tells me to keep creating stories that make you feel. Now, let's finish this. 6 weeks after the siege, Naira woke in the repaired penthouse to find Kale's side of the bed empty. She learned not to panic when this happened. He still didn't sleep well, still woke before dawn most days. The nightmares were worse now that he'd stopped taking the pills, but he said he wanted to feel them, wanted to remember so he could be better. She found him on the balcony, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. He wore only sweatpants, and she could see all his scars in the morning light, the roadmap of violence written on his skin. Couldn't sleep, she asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the chill. Thinking. Dangerous habit. The corner of his mouth lifted. I'm restructuring Black Meridian. Moving out of some of the more violent enterprises. Focusing on legitimate businesses where possible. Naira raised an eyebrow, coming to lean against the railing beside him. You're going straight? Mostly straight. I'll never be clean, Naira. But I can be cleaner. He turned to face her fully. I want to be a man you're not ashamed to love. A man who might someday deserve you. You already deserve me, you idiot. She poked him in the chest. But I'm not going to lie and say I don't like this plan. Less violence is always good. Less violence. Not no violence. His expression grew serious. There will still be threats. Still be danger. My world won't ever be completely safe. I know. She'd thought about this a lot over the past weeks. But nothing is ever completely safe. At least with you, I know the risks going in. And I choose them. I choose you. He pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her from behind so they were both facing the sunrise. I love you. Obsessively. Dangerously. In ways that probably violate several laws and definitely violate all common sense. I know. She leaned back against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady against her spine. I love you too. Recklessly. Completely. Against every piece of advice I've ever been given. We're quite a pair. The absolute worst. They stood there as the sun climbed higher, bathing the city in gold. The penthouse behind them bore scars from the attack, repaired but not erased. The world beyond was still dangerous, still full of people who wanted Kale dead. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. I need you to understand something, Kale said, his arms tightening around her. I will never be perfect. I'll make mistakes. I'll slip into old patterns. There will be days when the darkness feels like too much, and I'll push you away without meaning to. I know. And on those days, I'll push back. I'll remind you who you are and what we're building together. She turned in his arms to face him. You don't have to be perfect, Kale. You just have to try. And let me try with you. What did I do to deserve you? Nothing. That's the point. Love isn't something you earn. It's something you choose and something that chooses you back. She rose on her toes to kiss him, soft and sweet. And I choose you. Every single day, I choose you. Even knowing what I am? Especially knowing what you are. She smiled against his lips. You're mine, Kilvas. The violence and the empire and the broken pieces and the man trying to be better. All of it. Mine. Yours, he agreed, and kissed her like it was a promise. They went inside together, and Kale's phone was buzzing with messages, business that couldn't wait. But for the first time in his life, he ignored it. Instead, he pulled Naira back to bed, held her close, and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he could have this. Could have her. Could have something other than blood and power and loneliness. What are you thinking? Naira asked, her fingers tracing the tattoos on his chest. That I spent my whole life being untouchable. Building walls. Keeping everyone at a distance. He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. And then you walked into my world and demolished every defense I had. You terrify me. Good. You should be terrified. I'm going to love you so hard you won't know what hit you. He laughed, the sound free and genuine. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Months turned into a year. Kale restructured Black Meridian, as he'd said he would, moving away from drugs and violence toward money laundering, legitimate investments, businesses that existed in the gray area between legal and not. He'd never be clean, but he was trying, and that mattered. Naira became more than just his partner. She became his conscience, his anchor, the voice that reminded him there were lines he didn't have to cross anymore. She stood beside him in meetings with men who'd killed for less than a wrong word. She learned the business, learned the players, learned how to navigate his world without losing herself. They fought. God, how they fought. Screaming matches that ended with broken dishes and slammed doors and fierce, desperate reconciliations. But they never walked away. Never gave up. They'd promised each other that, in the beginning, that they'd fight for this, for them, no matter how hard it got. And it got hard. There were attempts on Kale's life. There were nights Naira waited by the door, not knowing if he'd come home. There were moments when the darkness threatened to swallow him whole, and she had to drag him back to the light inch by bloody inch. But there were also mornings like this one, 2 years after she'd first woken in his bed. Sunlight streaming through repaired windows. Coffee brewing in the kitchen. Kale's arms around her waist as she cooked breakfast, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you making?" he asked, his voice still rough from sleep. "Pancakes. Because you need to eat something that isn't coffee and violence." He huffed to laugh. "Violence isn't a food group. Tell that to your lifestyle choices." He spun her around, backing her against the counter, his eyes dancing with amusement and heat. "My lifestyle choices include you now. Best decision I ever made." "Worst decision I ever made," Naira countered, but she was smiling. "And I'd make it again in a heartbeat." Yeah. She pulled him down for a kiss. "You're stuck with me, boss. Better get used to it." "I think I can manage that." They ate breakfast together as the city woke up around them. They talked about mundane things, groceries to buy, meetings scheduled, a movie Naira wanted to see. Normal, boring, domestic things that felt revolutionary when you'd built your relationship on gunfire and adrenaline. This was what they'd fought for. Not perfection. Not safety. Just this. The choice to be together, to build something in the ruins of what they'd both been before. Kalevoss was still dangerous. Still ruthless when he needed to be. Still capable of violence that would make most people run screaming. But he was also the man who made sure Naira had fresh flowers every week. Who learned to cook her favorite meals. Who held her through nightmares and whispered promises in the dark about the life they were building together. And Naira Cole was no longer the scared nightclub hostess who'd woken up in a stranger's bed. She was a woman who'd walked into darkness and claimed it as her own. Who'd looked at a monster and seen a man worth loving. Who'd chosen danger and violence and a complicated, impossible love over safety and simplicity. They weren't saved. Weren't redeemed. Weren't suddenly good people because they loved each other. But they were together. And in a world as dark as theirs, that was its own kind of miracle. Later that night, as they stood on the balcony watching the city lights flicker to life, Kale pulled a small box from his pocket. "I know we don't do traditional," he said, opening it to reveal a simple platinum band. "And I know marriage in my world is complicated. But I want you to have this. Want everyone to know you're mine and I'm yours." Naira took the ring, studied it in the fading light. "You're proposing. I'm stating facts. We're already bound together in every way that matters. This just makes it official." He took the ring back, slid it onto her finger. "So what do you say, Naira Cole? Want to legally tie yourself to a reformed crime lord with trust issues and a violent past?" "Reformed is generous," she said, but her eyes were bright. "And yes, I'll marry you. On one condition." "Name it." "We do it our way. No traditions we don't want. No rules we don't make ourselves. Just us, choosing each other, the way we always have. Deal." He kissed her, soft and deep, and Naira thought about the girl she'd been 2 years ago. That girl would never have believed this was possible. Would never have imagined loving someone like this, with this intensity, this certainty. But that girl hadn't met Kalevoss yet. Hadn't learned that love wasn't always soft or safe. That sometimes the greatest romance was standing in the darkness with someone and saying, "I see you, all of you, and I'm not leaving." They stood there as night fell completely, two people who'd found each other in blood and chaos and somehow built something beautiful from the ruins. The city spread out below them, full of danger and possibility. And they faced it together, the way they always would. Not saved. Not innocent. Not perfect. But chosen. And that made all the difference. If you made it to the end of Naira and Kale's story, you're part of something special, and I need you to know how much that means. This channel exists because of you, because you engage and comment and share these stories with people who need them. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. And drop a comment telling me what you want to see next. More of Naira and Kale? A new couple? A different type of dangerous love? Your voice shapes what I create. Thank you for being here, for understanding that love isn't always pretty, but it's always worth fighting for. I'll see you in the next one.